Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As we all know, Greek philosophy has been a great cultural force in the history of Islam. Well, we, as we all know, Greek philosophy has been a great cultural force in the history of Islam. So, we did talk a bit about it last time. To say a few more things here. Firstly, Islam appeared in a region which was culturally very sophisticated, and their poetry and other genres like that of sermon or khutbah attest to the richness of that culture. And also it was connected to the world around it. Through trade mainly. So they have trade with the Roman Empire, and they were Arab, not empires, but tribal governments on the frontiers of both the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. And they were allied to either Persians or Romans. So those Arabs had cultural and religious link with both Persia and Romans. Similarly, within Arabia itself, like we're talking about the main Arab lands and the main Islamic lands, there were people living there from all over the world, because they were working there, or they were slaves, or whatever reason. They were people. Among the companions of the Prophet, you have Suhaib, who is supposed to be Roman. He's called Suhaib Romi. People have said that the Arab origin and originally Arab, but was enslaved by Romans. That's why he is known as Suhaib Rumi. And then there is Salman, who is from Persia. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he is Salman minna Ahl al-Bayt. He is a member of his family. And then you have Bilal, who is from Abyssinia, Ethiopia today. So what I want to say is that Islam arose in a region which has civilization, culturally very rich, has trade links with and cultural links with the world around it, and also there are people living from all over the world there. And although they are pagans themselves, but there are Christians in there, and there are Jewish communities living there. And Arab Peninsula itself is surrounded by other Arabs who are either allied to Persians or allied to Romans. And so there's a large population of Arabs who were Christians. And I'm not sure what was the religion of those Arabs who were allied to Persians, but for sure they were influenced by Persian culture and Persian religion and Persian through the exchange and all that. So it is in this context that Islam rose in the peninsula. I think I haven't recorded some of it, so I don't know where I actually turned it off. So what we are saying is that Greek philosophy very much broadened the outlook of Muslim thinkers. So I'm not sure. I mean, if it broadens it in certain aspects, then it must have limited it in certain other aspects. And the actual influence also needs to be assessed, how broad that influence was or how deep that influence was. On the one hand, we can see in Ghazali's definition of ontology, Ilm al-Kalam, for example, he almost equates Ilm al-Kalam with ontology. But that is primarily to just prove the existence of God. Once the existence of God is proven, then ontology doesn't have anything to say after that. There might be some terminological aspects in which there was an influence. For example, the question of the attributes of God was influenced by that terminology, the use of that terminology. But there are things to remember about that. Some of it actually predates Greek influence in the discourse of Mu'tazilah. The second thing is there are other schools of Ilm al-Kalam always which don't use Greek terminology, which use empiricist methods or the original Islamic methods, so to speak. So they weren't influenced by that terminology either. And even the philosophical Ilm al-Kalam, the influence on its terminology and its debate is only partial, because there are a lot of debates in Ilm al-Kalam which has nothing, there's no trace of Greek philosophy, even in terms of terminology. And the third thing is that even then, philosophical Ilm al-Kalam as a whole has only very little or very it doesn't have a central position in the Islamic discipline as such. It's just, one episode or one discipline among a variety of other disciplines which are more important. So we should, keep that in mind when we talk about the Greek influence and how it broadened the outlook of Muslim thinkers. But the main contention of Iqbal is that the Greek philosophy had a huge influence and it broadened their outlook, but the main contention is it is on the whole obscured their vision of the Quran. So the argument about Greek, so huge influence of Greek philosophy on Islamic culture, not just Ilm al-Kalam. It broadened their outlook. It doesn't say in what ways. The outlook. 3 from there. It's obscured their understanding of Quran, of the Quran. But that depends on the premise. This premise, you don't have to accept it, and even this, you don't have to accept it as it stands. So you don't have to accept this third, the conclusion as well. And on the whole, this conclusion presupposes that Muslims were reading Quran in the light of Greek philosophy, but that's not. Even if you read the commentary of Imam Razi, for example, who was one of the scholars who was, immersed in philosophical ilm kalam, and he was also very much influenced by Greek philosophy through Ibn Sina. I mean, even though he's the Ashari Imam in Ilm al-Kalam, in fact, he is really a disciple of Ibn Sina and not Ghazali as far as philosophy is concerned. Even his commentary, when you study it, I mean, there are aspects of it, where he talks about philosophical matters in Greek terminology and all that, but on the whole, it's a commentary on Quran from all different aspects, and the influence of Greek thought seems to me negligible, even in someone who was really, really influenced by Greek philosophy. Or if you're talking about Ibn Rushd, I mean, he's a great Maliki jurist, but his philosophical enterprise has no influence whatsoever on his other books, like on fiqh, for example, Bidayat al-Mujtahid and all that. So it seems to me, but you will see why Bal is making these claims. It's actually modernity which is driving all those claims, and we will come to that. So yet a careful study of the Quran and the various schools of scholastic theology that arose under the inspiration of Greek thought disclose the remarkable fact that while Greek philosophy was very much broadened the outlook of Muslim thinkers who are Muslim thinkers. I mean, if he's talking about Ibn Sina, so we might accept that, but Ibn Sina, as an Islamic thinker, he's a very marginal, negligible figure. So on the whole, obscure their vision of the Quran. So Quran, the people who were studying Quran, they rarely studied Greek philosophy, or even if they studied, that was just a part of their arsenal. And the Quranic commentaries has been written over, since the 1st century, from different perspective, from the linguistic perspective, from fiqh perspective, from tasawwuf, from kalam, etc. So, I mean, we have lots of commentaries preserved from that era, and anybody can look at those commentaries, and I don't think you will find any proof of this claim that Greek thinking had somehow obscured Muslims' understanding of the Quran. But let's see how he thinks that they might have obscured the. Socrates concentrated his attention on the human world alone. We don't know about that, because we don't have Socrates' work preserved today, and whatever we have about Socrates is through Plato. And Plato talks about all sorts of things. He talks about human world, he talks about astronomy, he talks about being, he talks about forms, he talks about ethics, metaphysics, etc. So I don't think there's any Socrates concentrated attention on the human world alone. To him, the proper study of man was man and not the world of the plants, insects, and stars. Well, his student Plato studied stars, and Plato's student Aristotle studies plants and insects and stars. So, and Islamic philosophy, mostly the influence of Greek philosophy on Muslim philosophy was through metaphysics, and to lesser extent in politics and political philosophy. But what is he driving at through here? How unlike the spirit of the Quran, which sees in the humble bee a recipient of divine inspiration. Divine inspiration, meaning, and constantly calls upon the reader to observe the perceptual change of the winds, the alternation of day and night, the clouds, the starry heavens, and the planets swimming through infinite space. As the true disciple of Socrates, Plato despised sense perception, which in his view yielded mere opinion and no real knowledge. Firstly, I don't see why Greek philosophy will stop people from observing perceptual change of the wind and alternation of the day and night, the clouds, the starry heavens, and the planets swimming through infinite space. I mean, Muslims read Quran day and night, wrote commentaries on it, and how can they ignore those verses? That's just crazy. As a true disciple of Socrates, Plato despised sense perception. I don't know whether he despised sense perception, but whatever he did, his theory of form arise out of his observation of sense perception and analysis of it in Theaetetus, for example. So I don't know how can he despise it. I mean, he might say that you have to go beyond sense perception to find more stable universals, but that doesn't mean he despises sense perception or doesn't look at it. And anyway, Aristotle, who had a greater influence, he's all about sense perception. I mean, empiricism is the hallmark of Aristotle's writing. And obviously, that all, even if we accept that, depends on Muslims read Quran with the eye of the hatred for sense perception. But how can that be? I mean, we have no proof of that. I mean, the Quranic commentaries. Because the Quran is read by Muslim day and night in various ways, so how can that be? As a true disciple of Socrates, Plato despised sense perception, which in his view yielded more opinion and no real knowledge. Yeah, but you get real knowledge through, transcending sense perception. So you still have sense perception is still the gateway, even in Plato. And even this reading is limited to some of Plato's books. So, how unlike the Quran, which regards hearing and sight as the most valuable divine gifts and declared them to be accountable to God for their activity in the world. So, firstly, it's itself debatable whether Greek philosophy didn't sense perception, didn't, and empiricism disregarded sense perception and empiricism. This claim is itself very dubious. On the other hand, still dubious is the claim that Muslims read the Quran in light of the philosophy of Plato or Socrates or even Aristotle. I mean, even mutakallimin and philosophers, I don't know of any philosopher who actually wrote the commentary on the Quran, but mutakallimin did. I mean, there's the Tafsir al-Kashaf in front of you, and Tafsir al-Qadir Razi is a great example. Nobody can say that unless you have never opened Tafsir al-Razi. And most of the tafsirs are not written from the perspective of Ilm al-Kalam. And that's true. If you are a grammarian, you are going to it is going to show in your commentary of the Quran, but that doesn't mean you are ignoring other things. That's just your specialization dominating your perspective. But that doesn't mean that everybody's specialization is grammar, for example, or philosophy. So there should be philosophical commentaries of the Quran. There should be commentaries from all angles. And that has been the case to this day. So I don't think this claim has any. And what is driving Iqbal here is something ulterior which will come soon, and which is his understanding of the modernity. How unlike the Quran, which regards hearing and sight as the most valuable divine gifts and declares them to be accountable to God for their activity in the world. This is what the earlier Muslim students of the Quran completely missed. Earlier, how early? It should be the companions or the Tabi'in or the Taba Tabi'in, the three, sanctified centuries. There's no proof of this. This is what the earlier Muslim student of the Quran completely missed under the spell of classical speculation. Firstly, classical speculation started very late, and secondly, they were limited to certain subjects which never had central position in Islamic curriculum. And even when we look at people specializing in those subjects, their commentaries are, show no sign that they ignored the signs of day and light, and like astronomy was very much a popular science in the Islamic world. And if you read the books which have been written by people from different backgrounds on Al-Hikmah fi Makhluqatillah, for example, Ghazali's has a book on that, and other people have and if you look at the poetry and other disciplines, I mean, there's no, in fact, a lot of Muslim disciplines like inductive method is something which you see in Usul al-Hadith and used in grammar for Nahv. Both schools of grammars, Kufis and Basaris, they use inductive method. For Ilm al-Rijal, you have inductive method, and Sira, and all those. And there's a lot of debate about the induction and memory and testimony from a logical point of view, which is not central to Aristotle's logic, etc. So I think this claim needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. This is what the early Muslim students of the Quran completely missed under this fellow of classical thought. Classical speculation. They read the Quran in the light of Greek thought. I think those who were immersed in Greek thought, they didn't worry too much about the Quran. It took them over 200 years to perceive, though not quite clearly, that the spirit of the Quran was essentially anti-classical. And the result of this perception was a kind of intellectual revolt, the full significance of which hasn't been realized even up to the present day. Okay, we'll look at this revolt next time.